So this is an explanation of the Four Noble Truths, which is very much the basis of Buddhism. And normally this is explained as a list. So you have the first truth, the second truth, third truth, fourth truth. And I'm going to explain it in a slightly different way, more as an overview. And to do that I'm going to draw something. Some strange practice, noughts and crosses. So these are, I'm going to fill in the four truths in these circles. And the first one I'm going to start with is the third truth, which is realizing liberation. Liberation. And it can also be thought of as ceasing greed, anger and general confusion. The cessation of greed, anger and confusion. Realizing liberation is a more positive way of putting it. The word that is often used about this is nirvana, and that means to extinguish. Extinguishing the fuel that creates greed, anger and general confusion. And this, in a way, is like the mind in a very calm, clear, bright state, just like a mirror, or like a lake in the autumn. Like now, this is September, it's autumn time, and if you go and see a pond or a lake, you can see the reflection of the scenery very clearly in it. You can hardly tell the difference between the scenery and the actual reflection that's there. So there's something like that mirror-like, bright awareness that doesn't add anything, take anything away, just as it is. This is it, as it is. This, in a sense, in Buddhism has been, the Buddha referred to there being an unborn, uncreated, unconditioned. It's the mind in this unborn, unconditioned state. There's nothing formed, created in that. In Japan, people draw these circles, enzo. They're almost like empty circles, and they're pointing to this. If you look at the books on the Four Noble Truths, there's big chapters on the first truth, the second truth, and the fourth truth, but the one on the third truth is slightly reduced, and that's because this is beyond words. It's pointing to something that's inexpressible on one level, and yet you have to express it. You could draw the circle and then rub it out. And people might understand or have some sense of that, or they might get very confused. So it's a difficult area in some ways. But this, in a sense, is the goal of Buddhism, is to realise this liberation from anger, where you're pushing things away, or aversion, pushing things away. Greed, where you're pulling things in. And general confusion, where you just don't know what's going on. But most of the time it's like this. This state looks like this. Can do different colours. These are the kind of waves and ripples and breakers which completely distort any kind of experience of it. Greed, anger and general confusion. Most people are quite familiar with this. And the thing about Buddhism, quite often it starts here, so people think, oh, suffering, that's what it's all about. Well, it's about liberation from suffering. Now, come round this side actually. That's it. This is the first truth, and this is called, this stuff here is called dukkha. I'm using that word because it's quite often translated as suffering, and it's quite often talked of as being unsatisfactoriness. It's not the way I'd like it to be. The world isn't the way I'd like it to be. English is a very specific language. It uses very narrowly defined words. So dukkha is much more broad than that. So dukkha ranges from very dire kind of experiences, traumatic experiences, to things like going shopping and buying your new computer part, and next week seeing it much reduced, dukkha. We go sail in the shops next week, the same thing which you thought you got a bargain, much reduced, dukkha. But then it's also experiencing death of a relative, or someone you love, or a relationship breaking up, or all of the kind of horrendous things that happen in the world today with wars and people being tortured, etc. All of this is all-encompassing, this sense of our existence is tinged with this sense of unsatisfactoriness and suffering. And the most dramatic form of that is old age, disease and death. Everything has this, appears, passes away and fades from view and is no longer there. Everything in a sense is impermanence, and one of the characteristics of Buddhism is it talks a lot about impermanence. Everything's changing, everything's flowing. That means that we change, that we don't stay the same. On one level that's quite a good thing, because it means you can change, you're not stuck. But it also means that you're subject to everything around you changing, and you don't do that very well. If your job changes, dukkha. Your house has to be, you have to move your house suddenly, your landlord wants the rent increased and you have to move, dukkha. It's there all the time, because we exist, we experience it. And in a sense we have to, it's more like accepting this is the way it is, accepting dukkha. I should say, number one, accepting. You have to accept that this is the way it is. Now, Buddhists explain how we generate this stuff. How do we make these ripples on the surface of this? I wasn't going to read them. And this is like a series of cogwheels. Should we do some different cogwheels? So you have the anger kind of cycle. You have the greed kind of cycle, and you have the delusion cycle. Making this stuff. So when I say they're kind of like, they're a bit like cogwheels in a gearbox. They kind of intermesh with each other. And the Buddhism has a kind of an explanation of this cycle, and it's broken down into 12 steps. So there's something which you're ignoring, something which you then creates a habitual pattern in your mind. It affects your consciousness, affects your body and mind, how you sense things. You come into contact with the next event, which generates a feeling, which you're then going to start to cling on to. Then you grasp it, and then it's too late. There's something which is going to arise or become out of that, which is going to have its life and death. It's going to appear and vanish, leaving behind it this trace of unresolved stuff which isn't around. So you can, there's something which you want, there's a wanting, there's something empty inside of you, which is a habitual patterning in your mind, which is then going to affect your consciousness, it's going to affect your body and your mind, the way that you sense things. You're going to come into contact with the next wonderful piece of electronic equipment. You generate a feeling that you want that, that you start to hold on to too tight. You cling on to it, you grasp it, you get it, and it's sort of, there's a pixel missing, or it's not quite right. You'll see the next one. There's something there which is going to arise, and then it starts to fade in its wonderfulness, leaving behind it this sense of wanting something else, which is going to go round again. So, our society is almost based on this cycle. See it, you need it, you want it, you get it, but it's not quite right. Well, this is the next model, get another one. And we're locked into this, and we feel unsatisfied. There's something that's unsatisfactory about that, and we don't find peace. The same kind of thing happens with aversion as someone who you don't like. There's something, that's in there, as you're ignoring something, not aware of it, is patterning your mind. It's affecting your consciousness, it's affecting your body and mind, your body language. There's people who go around saying, "Why don't you like me?" And they don't realise that they're frowning or that they're giving that impression, and that it's going to affect how you sense things. You're going to come into contact with the next person that you don't like, who generates this feeling. You want to cling on to that not being there. You really grasp that, make something else happen that pushes them away in some way or another. That has its consequences, which arise, pass away, and leave behind it this sense of, I don't like that person. And then you're going to do it again. So these are sort of simple examples, but just about everything, you can also put most things through this kind of series of cycles. The greed cycle, the aversion cycle, the general confusion one. So, this is the second truth. So, dodging backwards and forwards here. The second truth, which is understanding. You're actually understanding this kind of cycle of cause and effect. Cause and effect. And one of these points in particular is called clinging, which is quite often why Buddhism, you hear them talking about clinging. And it's because it's one of these kind of key points here. Now these cycles are more like links on a bicycle chain. If you have a chain on a bike or a motorbike, they're links, and if you take one of the links out, then this stuff starts to fall away. So Buddhism is about almost like taking out some of these links, and the way it's worked out how to do that, whether Buddha worked out how to do that basically, was the fourth truth, which is called the Eightfold Path. It's got 8 areas to it. So this is a practice. So you're going to practice the Eightfold Path. And I'm going to start in a non-traditional way. I'm going to start with speech. So one of the things which you practice as a Buddhist is how you speak, or brackets these days, what you send. Nowadays, you send a tweet, you put a blog post, email, even putting up pictures, all kinds of things. You press send with those thumbs. Press send. And speech is a similar kind of thing. You've said it, once you said it, it's happened. Once you sent it, it's going to make that kind of imprint on the vast world internet server base, and it's very hard to get it back. Once you've said it, you can't pull it back. So you can speak in a right way. There's a right speech which leads to this, or there's speech which isn't right, which creates all this kind of stuff. And you can see it with particularly something like Twitter. Someone does the tweet that is a bit of an off joke. When they arrive at their destination, it's gone viral and their career is in ruins. It takes them 2 years to recover just from typing a few characters and pressing send. So speech is something which we really need to practice with in order to deal with the suffering so that we can realise liberation. Next one is action, and that's a bit more out there, because how you're going to act is going to affect this. So Buddhism is quite ethical, so it has the precepts about not killing, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct and getting intoxicated. I mean, these 5 are common to just about every Buddhist tradition. And it's because they create this stuff. If you kill, you do that. If you steal, you do that. And we tend to think we don't do any of that, but you can steal reputations, you can kill time. These things are much more subtle than just gross nicking stuff out of Superdrug. It's better than that. It's much more than that. And you have to almost like see, well, you can actually steal your own peace of mind by taking drugs in a certain way. Was that the drug, or was that real? Is that true? You start to blur your own certainty. You can steal your own certainty. You can get really confused with ideals and stick to them so much that people actually kill for them. You know, and it's almost like that's seen as justified. People, you know, go to war over certain things and create huge amounts of this. This is an interesting area. So the next one after that is even more broader still, which is livelihood. It's how you interact with the wider community, how you earn your living, or how you interact more broadly with people. Because everyone's got, in terms of the goon show, everyone's got to be somewhere, and you have to, you know, live, food, shelter, these kind of things, and how you actually go about getting that. You can do it in a way that creates a lot of this, or not. And in Buddhism there's a traditional set of ways of earning your living which was seen to create a lot more suffering. And one of them was trafficking people, for instance, dealing in people, dealing in weapons, dealing in poisons, dealing in intoxicants. These were things which would create this kind of stuff. And it's obvious. But even 2,500 years ago, the Buddha was talking about dealing in people was going to create a huge amount of suffering. So try not to earn your living in that area. But this, once again, is a difficult kind of thing because we're all intermeshed with this, we're all interlinked with it. Where I live here, there's a huge MOD kind of presence in one way or another. And it's part of the economy. We wouldn't be able to be here without it. So you're linked into something which you may not, you can't get out of it by living the pure life somewhere. You're integrated with all of this, and you have to do the best you can to earn your living in a good way. So this is a kind of practical area. So Buddhism isn't just this kind of navel-gazing interior, you know, enlightened type of thing where someone meditates and they come off the ground kind of thing. Next one is effort. So, in order to deal with this kind of stuff, you have to make a huge amount of effort. It's not an easy thing to do. These things are circles, they're cycles, they're strong kind of things which we get locked into. They're addictive cycles. You need to make a lot of effort to actually stop doing what is, I suppose a Buddhist term would be unwholesome and promote things which are good. And if you look at the right effort descriptions you'll see that they're talking about how to deal with addiction. There's a number of techniques to deal with addiction. The next one is mindfulness, or mindful awareness. I'm going to say mindful awareness, or paying attention. I think that one of the troubles with the word mindfulness is it means you're trying to think it, as opposed to it's an embodied awareness of what you're doing. It's really important that we tend to make everything in our minds in the West. We tend to think much more up here. So I'm mindfully going to, you also have to think how you're going to walk. If you think how you're going to walk, you're going to fall over. You have to learn how to be paying attention in a much more open and aware kind of way. So that you're aware of your thoughts, you're aware of what you're saying, you're aware of your actions. So you're aware of your body, and that's quite often forgotten. People get very aware of their thoughts, but they aren't aware of their body, or aware of what they're saying, or aware of what they're doing in that way. So this practice here is very much linked into being aware of what you're saying and what you're actually doing, how you're interacting with the wider community. It's linked together. And then the next one after that is meditation, which every now and again you see meditation portrayed as almost like sort of making the mudra, so to speak, and going into a cupboard and humming. But everything's too difficult, you've just got to get away from it. So it's almost like seen as an escape. Well, meditation isn't that at all. Meditation is a process of centering yourself so that you're aware of what you're doing, so you're more aware of the pain, the suffering, the unease. You have to be aware of it, otherwise you can't do anything about it. So it's much more of something that's linking you into being present and being able to let it go. Meditation practice, you let things go. You sit there, you let it go. You just sit, let it go. So you might be aware of something, but you also have to have the meditation practice to let it go. So it's not trying to block it out or push it away, it's to be with whatever that is and to allow it to pass. To be still with difficult feelings and thoughts and generally. If you do this, then your understanding is going to change, and your understanding is how, from a Buddhist perspective, is that everything is interconnected. It's you aren't separate. You can't be separate. If we take the air out of this room, I'll die. So you're intimately linked with the entire universe. And the other thing that happens from a Buddhist perspective is your understanding that the sense of me, self, is an illusion. The Buddha deconstructed this sense of self by saying there are 5 processes which give you the impression that you're in the middle and the stuff is happening around. And that this sense of me it's a necessary illusion, but it's not. Don't hold on to it too tight. So you have to let that sense of separateness go. It's much more a way of integrating in that way. And it's also understanding how we're separate from this. We create that sense of separation from this. 4 Noble Truths are explaining how to find this, how to reconnect. And that's part of the understanding as well. And then one after that is like your view or your intention, or another good word is attitude. Your view or if you understand you're interconnected with everything and that you're not so separate, then you're going to be kind, compassionate, less violent. Your attitude is going to be very different. Which means that you're going to change the way that you speak, how you act, how you interact, and your awareness and meditation deepen, make more effort, your understanding gets clearer, and you actually act more compassionately. So this is a bit like one of these things that goes around, it's a bit like a washing machine. I'm putting it in this too. And if you do that, then you start to knock out some of these links. One of the links that's around here is something you're ignoring, so you're paying much more attention to what's going on. Another one is around here is there's a feeling that you feel and you can just experience it and let it go, so that the awareness and the meditation help with that. And there's another one which is clinging. It's quite hard to let go. I remember talking to someone once and they couldn't understand what letting go was. And I gave them a pencil, so let it go. And they couldn't let it go because they had to think how to let go. Well, you let go by doing that, And it's something which is really that simple in a sense, but we don't trust it. So we have to let go that way. So this practice has a go at these cycles around here. And it starts, if you start to do that and knock these links out, then there's less of this. And it's more apparent. So this starts to have disappeared all in the places. Sometimes there's a great big chunk drops off. So it's very dangerous. Because people think they're enlightened. They think they're here and they've still got this. And there's a number of people who are wonderful, they've still got some of this, and you really have to be careful. There's more to do in that sense. Now, this is called practicing, by the way. This is a practice. So Buddhism's answer to suffering is it's a practice of this eightfold path in these 8 areas. It isn't just meditation, it's all of these other things. Have I spelled that wrong? Practicing. Can't spell. Right, so the Buddha said that there was a disease, it had a cause, it was possible to cure it, this was the cure. So it's much more like an equation than a list. And this is called the Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths. Because they're seen as truths which you can have to prove it true for you. It's not required to just believe this. You have to see, is this actually the case? Does this help you? And if it does, then you practice it. So that's it.